Hello, I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Mike Vanderplas. Mike and we met in Los Angeles. You'll have to check out the podcast story about our Dubai experience. In brief, Mrs. Santa Claus and I were in Las Vegas to catch the plane to Dubai. We were not let on the phone because our passports were going to expire in 5 months and they needed to be valid for 6 months. And so we drove to LA to do an expedited passport renewal or extension. And in the line, we met Mike, who was getting an expedited passport as well. And we shared smiles back and forth because Mrs. Claus and we were in our red sweatsuits and had our Santa hat on and everything. I don't even recall. Did we have a conversation at that window, Mike?
I think all I said is great beard.
Right? Something like that. Anyway, we exchanged some niceties and smiled at each other. We had some business to take care of, trying to get our passports taken care of. And then we were told, hey, come back in a couple of hours. We'll see what we can do. And so Mrs. Claus and we headed off to have some breakfast at a nearby restaurant. And it just so happens that, Mike, you were already there enjoying an omelet, I think. We started a conversation. Mike asked us what we were up to. Hey, we're on our way to Dubai. We're Santa and Mrs. Claus. And he's like, oh, that is so cool. Then in asking Mike what he was all about, it really piqued my curiosity. And the hook for me was that Mike works with PTSD, people that are going through that, other traumas and things like that. And we'll get some more depth into it as the conversation goes along. But the hook, and I'll tell you, Mike, you had a practical approach to addressing individuals who don't see themselves as worthy of being on the nice list. Because I run into that all the time, especially when I talk to adults. Hey, have you been good this year? And they're like, no, I've been a naughty boy or a naughty girl or whatever, and they're really kind of self-deprecating on the nice list. And your practical approach to getting out of that mindset, because we all do bad things in our lives, that's just part of human nature. But you had a practical approach that really hooked me in. And that's the introduction to where we're going to go for this podcast. So let me tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike Vanderplas. He's a 3-time international best-selling author, highly sought-after speaker, and leading authority on suicide prevention and PTSD recovery. An award-winning mental health advocate and veteran ICU travel nurse, Mike has saved hundreds of lives and earned the trust of many elite U.S. military personnel, many of whom credit him with changing or even saving their lives. And with over 2 decades of nursing experience and more than 30 years of suicide prevention, Mike has authored 4 books on mental health and co-authored 2 others. His groundbreaking work has been featured on ABC, NBC, and Fox News, as well as foreign media outlets. Mike has delivered hundreds of presentations to audiences ranging from 5 to 5,000 plus across 9 countries, including trainings for U.S. military personnel, corporate leaders, universities, and nonprofit organizations. He has coached athletes, special forces operators, entrepreneurs, and top-level executives on leadership, resilience, and emotional health. A passionate educator and high-impact storyteller, Mike's vision is clear: to save over 10,000 lives through practical tools, powerful insights, and transformational speaking that inspires action. And man, I am honored to have you as a guest, Mike. Thank you for joining SantasAbout.
It's an honor for me to be sitting with Santa.
It's interesting because there's very few moments in life where you meet somebody and feel like you've made an instant connection. And that was definitely the case for me.
That's how I felt too, like jumping in deep into the deep end. When I met you and Mrs. Claus, I loved just the outfits. And the guy gave you suggestion for the place to go have breakfast, but somehow I beat you guys to the place. And when I saw
Yeah.
you guys, I just had to ask you. And then the conversation went so organic quickly. And I remember
Yeah.
some that Mrs. Claus said on the way back. There was 2 or 3 stores, and I can't remember them exactly, but I remember the impact they had on me. It was kind of that there is a serendipity, there is a lucky encounter with other people that just change your lives. And it was a beautiful, beautiful conversation. And I'm super glad that we're keeping this friendship going forward. So,
And Mike, interestingly enough, having had that experience in Dubai
mm,
where we met a number of adults who had never seen Santa before because of the nature of being in a Muslim country, right? And some of the takeaways that we talked about that day, we actually used as we gave advice or talked about wishes and the goodness that is inherent in all of us, but sometimes we just need a little help getting that goodness out. So thank you for your insights. But let's get to know you a little bit more. Tell us about the evolution of Mike. You started out in nursing.
no, no, nursing is not how I started out. So, quick little background, just a Rocky Mountain boy from Layton, Utah, smaller town. Back when I was a kid, it was even smaller. Mom was legally blind, dad was a Dutch immigrant and has Asperger's. And they got divorced when I was 4.5. And so I grew up pretty poor. I grew up pretty self conscious. I went through some periods of depression and some bad thoughts myself. And then when I was 19, growing up in Utah, a lot of us uh, are or were Mormons. And so I went on a Mormon mission to Brazil, learned the Portuguese language, confidence started to boost a little bit more, came home, got married, and the wife said, "You got to go to school." So I went to school and I studied logistics and operational management. It's a form of business management, supply chain management. Loved it. But then there was an episode at the company I was at, and the boss was literally standing right over me, yelling at me to yell very derogatory things to somebody on the other line who messed up on one of our shipments. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. This is
Right.
a truck full of phone books for those of you who are old enough to remember what phone books are. And I remember I was like, I don't want to do this. And so I kind of wandered a little bit for about a year or two. And then I heard about nursing and that there was a nursing shortage. And I thought, if I have to get yelled at because I messed up somebody's life or put their life in jeopardy, or if I were to yell at somebody because they put someone else's life in jeopardy, that's something worthy of yelling at because that's a human life, and that's where some importance should be. So I switched over to nursing. I've been in it a little over 20 years now, and most of that is ICU. I did a lot of ICU at some high level units. I did fixed wing life flight for a little bit, just a few flights. But I was a ICU travel nurse during COVID. About the year before COVID, I was really interested in psych. So I switched to a psych hospital for a year. And then when COVID came out, all of my ICU buddies, I'd be talking to them on the phone those first few months where everybody was really confused and everybody was really scared. And I'd be talking to them about different ideas. I'm like, hey, have you guys tried out dexamethasone for this? It works for altitude sickness. Maybe it'll help with the lungs in this situation. Oh, that's a good idea, Mike. And they all were all asking me, they're like, so what unit are you working in right now? And I told them psych. They were like, oh my gosh, what are you doing there? We need you out here. And I went through 2 or 3 months of just stress because I had a friend at the other hospital who looks like a young version of you with red hair. Like your facial are very similar. Nick said, but you're saving so many lives here. The adolescents at this psych hospital, need you too. But I made the switch. I went back to ICU for a few years during COVID, did travel contracts, just a few around the country, some here locally in Utah. And then when I was finishing up my last contract, which was here in Utah in Provo, I was taking care of the mother of the CEO of a psychiatric hospital in Salt Lake City. And he'd read my first book on suicide prevention. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to have you come out to my hospital." Uh, so he hired me out there. And then I've been there for the past 3.5 years, written a few more books on suicide prevention. And at the hospital that I work at now, I'm a supervisor. I've actually been a supervisor at 4 hospitals. And so I take care of the patients, I take care of my staff. And one of the most rewarding parts of it is we have 3 military units at our facility for PTSD recovery, which was the birthplace of my most recent book on PTSD recovery for the military.
That's fantastic. So you've really gone the whole gamut of healthcare, from fixing the physical
Yeah.
to dealing with the emotional.
Yeah. I've got a few different thoughts that are going through my mind on that. First one is there was a guy, I can't remember where I learned of this guy, but I remember his name, Jonathan in a Pulsier. And he had this line that I have loved. And there's a neuroscientist out of Stanford named Andrew Huberman, who kind of mirrors almost the same exact words. And this Jonathan guy, he said, the body controls the mind controls the body. And I think that's true. Andrew Huberman, who works alongside a guy who has a Nobel Prize, Robert Sapolsky, he basically said that the body affects the mind more than the mind affecting the body. So what that is basically, if we are stagnant physically, we do have a greater chance of falling into depression. But with that, when I'm on like TV shows and I just have like a 5-minute segment on a morning show or something like that, where they're like, you have 5 minutes, we're going to give you 5 minutes, give something of value, something really quick. Or if I'm, brought up on stage or somebody asks me something and I know that I've got a really short panel, I tell people to do 5 things daily. And most of them deal with something physical. And those 5 things daily, there's no particular order for these things. But if you do these 5 things daily, it helps you get out of the negative thoughts. And I know this because I used it on myself. And so do something physical, do some workout, go for a walk, clean the garage, do some gardening, just something. It doesn't need to be some heavy workout. Just move physically. And in some way that helps you out. Like, there's a lot of science behind it. I think it's basically the basis of a form of therapy called EMDR. The lady who invented that, Francine Shapiro, she reportedly was going on a walk while she was thinking about deep thoughts. And basically it goes back to kind of our lizard brain, where our eyes are rapidly looking in different directions, searching for threats. And so we have to go into a different mindset, which is called dissociated, which means kind of zoned out a little bit. And when we go into that zoned out phase, we're able to process our other things, our negative thoughts, logically instead of just emotionally. So this is a time where you separate the emotions from the logic. So second thing, I say, learn something new, because when you learn something new, you feel smarter. And when you feel smarter, it makes you feel better about yourself. Do something. So learn something, do something intellectual. So that could be one of the others. One of the other things that I say to people is do something social. So get out with somebody else. Like, don't just social media, like get out and do something else. And you can mix that with something one of the others already. So let's say I go on a hike because I live here in Utah. I've met very few people on hikes who are jerks. All people on hikes are cool. Almost all the people who go on walks are pretty cool. And you walk by and you just say, hey, how's it going? Good. How's your morning? Good. And they say it back to you. Some kind of social interaction helps with us. And that's because we are social beings. I believe in a higher power. I believe in a God. I also believe in science and evolution. My belief is that we evolved, we had to, for our survival, be social people, connecting with other people. Because if I was out in the wilderness by myself, I'd die on my own. And so we like had to work together in families, in larger hunter-gatherer groups, and then bigger societies just for our own survival. So it's hardwired into our bodies. Next thing is do some work. And that could be the homework. That could be the cleaning the garage. That could be going to your job, just getting something done, because it ties back to the same thing with when you learn something or when you do something intellectual. You feel better about yourself that you actually made movement. And then the last thing that I put on, and I always put this as the last, the other four, I sometimes mix them up, but I always put this thing as the last because it's a huge thing. Get 6 to 9 hours of sleep. Studies have shown that with decreased sleep, we have increased anxiety, depression, negative thoughts. So the body really does affect the mind. The other thing that I want to say was actually the comment that I was going to make before you made the question. That's the body affecting the mind affecting the body. I was in an ICU one day. I remember walking out of this patient's room. This patient was like, I can't remember if they were all of them, but like angry, depressed, grumpy. And I walked out of the room thinking to myself, why are so many of my ICU patients angry, grumpy, depressed, sometimes jerks? Why are so many of them like that? And then this like click just popped in my mind. I said, are they angry, sad, and grumpy because they're in the ICU, or are they in the ICU because they're angry, sad, and grumpy? And I remember that's where I really, even though I've worked in suicide prevention since I was 16, with child psychologists helping out other teens, suicide hotlines, things like that, that hadn't occurred to me. And I remember that's when I really, really started studying psychology a lot more and really getting into it and just realizing, well, if I don't want this person to have, cardiovascular disease, maybe I can help cut it off before they're coming in at 60 or 70 years old. What if I can help them with their anxiety, depression, and their negative thought in their teens, 20s, 30s, to where it doesn't put a negative effect on the body that results in death down the road. So it was me thinking more of like a preventative measure than a reactive measure to their physical issue.
Yeah. And it seems like in both cases, there's the circular motion, right? In the positive 5-step things that you talked about, you get more sleep, you feel more lively to go out and take a walk, to get social, which then allows you to process negative thoughts, which allows you to sleep better and to work better and things like that. And then also the circular pattern on the other side, I'm angry, grumpy, mad. It affects my health in a poor way, which makes me more angry. I heard it explained once as a vicious cycle, which is the downward spiral,
Yeah.
and a delicious cycle.
I got to write that down.
Right? It sounds like vicious, delicious. So
That is perfect.
oh man, those nuggets of information, Mike, fantastic. And from personal experience, even as Santa Claus, I can vouch for both of those on a personal level, and then also witnessing that in other people. And And your life experiences, you have seen probably many more examples than just the average person
Yeah.
of both.
I frequently say this, that I've been in more life and death situations than most, and more than any human should have to. So that deals
Yeah.
with both the physical, hands on the chest, doing CPR, doing the other rescue measures that we do, meds, shocks, the shock,
Mm-hmm.
you see on TV, which they do it different. They do the CPR different too. Like I know when it's a good medical writer, when I'm watching the codes and I'm like, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. Okay. That's good. you know, I've been in hundreds, if not thousands of those situations, literally with the mental health. Every place that I go out to, that I do a presentation, that I do a talk, or in my own hospital where I'm talking to a patient. Because even though I'm the supervisor, I like talking to the patients one-on-one as well. People, especially when I do presentations, and I've got conferences these next 2 weekends, so I know this will happen to me. I get a lot of people who want the opportunity to talk to somebody about either themselves or a loved one who's going through some of these negative thoughts. So I see it on that emotional side as well. I get a lot of people who ask me, they're like, why do you do this? That seems like a lot of weight on your shoulders. Why do we do this? And it is a lot of weight, but I've seen more so that I've built thicker skin. And with that ability to have the thicker skin, I think it's a responsibility. It's not something I would have probably chosen to do, but I feel like I have built up over the years the mental fortitude to where if I'm not doing it, then I'm not doing what I've been sent here to do. I feel like it's bigger than me that's making me do this. If I don't do this after my life, I would be questioned why I didn't do more. That's part of what drives me.
I absolutely love that and agree 100% because you found your purpose. People that don't find their purpose struggle more. Man, this has been great, Mike. I do need to take a short break. And so a quick message from our sponsor. But when we come back, we're going to go over some approaches and practical applications on how to improve our mental health, which will then improve our physical health. There again, this delicious cycle. And we'll get into your stated message. So stay tuned. Quick pause, friends. This adventure, it's brought to you by Curb and Turf, the free app that connects RVers with private landowners. You see, as Mrs. Claus and I travel the country, we need safe, welcoming places to camp. And Curb and Turf delivers private spots all across the U.S. So when you plan your next trip, you got to ask yourself, why not camp where Santa camps? Download the free Curb and Turf app today. So welcome back, Mike. I want to circle back to your ICU experience where you came to the determination that it may be the reason they're in ICU is because they're grumpy, angry, whatever. Did you see people that were put into ICU, for an accident, not necessarily for health deterioration, but they had the positive outlook? And how did they respond to treatment in ICU versus those that had the negative thoughts and the negative outlook?
I don't know if there's research out there, but I'd be very surprised if there's not research that shows that the people with the better attitudes have better outcomes. I'd be very shocked. That's what it looked like to me, without
Right.
getting, the pen and paper out and doing all the research on it. That's what I saw. So with that, like one of the things that I started doing at that ICU and I did it for a few years, is whenever I'd work an ICU shift, if my patients were conscious in the place, and especially if they're bummed out, I was like, come on, man, we got a boogie. We got to get it down. And I'd put on music and I'd do mini dance parties. I was like, all right, move your arms, even if they were laying down. All right, move your arms, move your feet. Come on. And it was a way to do like PT with them as well. But I'd see a smile on their face. And I'd see smiles and tears in the eyes of family members. And sometimes the family members would join in. And so I really strived to switch that over For the patients who were intubated, sedated, and orphaned, we call them. So the people who are just laying there and no family members there at that moment, I would purposely try and talk to them, because there is clear research that the last thing to go on a patient is their hearing. So their hearing acuity is there. So something's getting in, even if it's just in the subconscious mind. And I would constantly say, every day, every way, you're getting stronger, healthier, and I just say all these things, I'm really proud of you. And I just give them a lot of positive impact. Hey, I see that you're making a change. I think you're doing really good. And I would say that because I'd be in the room alone with them, charting, you know, doing stuff with the IVs, adjusting the pumps, all these different things. Super important that I try and teach every new nurse that I train, or nursing schools that I go and speak to. One of the big things I always teach is touch the patient in a way that's not for your job. So touch them in a way of love, and that might just be a hand on the shoulders. I used to grab the feet a lot and just do like a little shake of their feet, like at the bottom of the bed.
And that brings up another thought that I've been working through as I've prepared for our podcast.
Okay.
In the mental health world, there is the buzzword mental health. We hear politicians talk about it, and how it relates to the homeless problem, how it relates to our health and things like that. But their solutions that they offer is just throw more money at mental health. And in the example of homelessness, it's like, let's throw a bunch of money at it to make people feel like they're okay to stay in that state. But your approach, in reading from the book chapters that you sent over, you talk about practical tools and action. Why is action so much more important than just let's throw a blanket over people and help them feel cozy in the state that they're in?
I think it goes back to some of the things that I said on those 5 points, because those all involve action. You can think a million things and get absolutely nowhere. You'll have people who have a great business idea and they think that they should be a millionaire because they have an idea, but they don't have any follow through on how to do it. Don't make the money. The people who make the money, who are the big business people, are the people who do something. It's the same thing with us as humans. If we don't take even teeny steps, then we're not going to go forward. Sir Isaac Newton said, in one of his laws of physics, I'm not sure if it's the first or the third, I can't remember for sure, but an object in motion will stay in motion unless an opposite force is put against it. That's the same thing with the human body, the human mind. You need to take action to try and grow, especially after the age of like 25, 26, if you want to grow mentally and emotionally, because up until that age, our mind is what's called plastic. It means that it can make different brain connections, different neuron connections. After that age, you have to try and put work in order to make those connections. We used to think that the mind couldn't really learn too much more, like it wasn't able to change in personality. It can, but it takes a lot more effort. So when we put forth the effort to take actual steps to do things, it makes us feel more successful. I had a friend, a coach, who trained me years ago, and he used to say, if you want your body to move, you need to move your body. And that's the same thing. You need to take all these little steps. And sometimes it's teeny steps. Sometimes it's as easy as, like I said, going on a walk, deep breathing, doing some deep breathing. Yeah. Some of the hugest changes that we do with our patients who have PTSD from military life, from pre-military life, all those things. And boy, that's a whole gamut. There's a lot of things that I learned when I started out there is this. You get a pen, you get a piece of paper, and you write down your thoughts. Two big things are, one, talking it out loud with someone else that can help you think and look from the outside. That's what a lot of therapy is. The other thing is just journaling, a lot of journal exercise. And there's a billion of them. And well, maybe not a billion, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of different journaling techniques that I try and put people through as well. Stuff that I've learned. Today I feel blank because of blank. And then you just write. There's a lot of other skills that you can do. But when we write, this speed at which our mind thinks is forced to slow down. And when we slow down, we're able to logically think through it. And like I said, pull out of the emotions a little bit to logically think through it. And when we have a new realization, the pain of the negative thing isn't so bad. Like, think about this. Have you ever had an experience in your life where you've had an argument with somebody or a disagreement? Maybe it's not an argument. Maybe it's just a disagreement. And you do not know where this person's thoughts are coming from. They're from left field. They're way out there. But then maybe somebody else comes and tells you a little bit about what that person was thinking. And even though you might not agree, you're like, oh, okay, I understand where that came from. I don't agree. But then the tension kind of reduces. That's the same thing that we can do with ourselves by simply writing. And there's different programs that we can do that take the actual steps to help people through those. Some of it is visualization, write a letter. We do this in our military group. This is something I did before I started at this hospital for like 6 or 7 years before. But you get a piece of paper, you get a pen. Let's say you have an argument with somebody. You've got something you just can't figure out how to resolve with that person. Maybe you just do an exercise where you write a letter to them. Absolutely. Somebody that treated you bad. You write a full letter about everything that you hate about them, all this stuff. You write it all out. You write about your feelings. And then you grab that paper and you go outside and you get a lighter and you let it go up in smoke, because there's something about the visualization of that problem rating that helps to cure it. That's just like one example.
And that goes back to one of the 5 steps. You're actually physically doing something. Let me go back to what initially intrigued me the very first time that we met. You had talked about in your treatment of particularly military people who have gone through acts of war, that they've done things that they wouldn't do as their own individual. That's war, right? We have a tendency as people to beat ourselves up over things that we've done in the past. I'm not just saying, hey, let's look at the extreme examples of war, but anything, right? An adult may look back on their teenage life and they did something really stupid that teenagers do, and they beat themselves up over it. What practical actions do you suggest for helping people not get stuck in their past experiences?
Well, I need to thank you for bringing this up, because before this, I had mostly just thought about that with PTSD, but it does work very well for anybody who has, when I say PTSD, I mean major PTSD. This is a really good insight of using those same tools, those same 3 tools. Well, this isn't originally my idea. I went and I saw a psychologist who I really admire, saw a lecture of his in Arizona. The guy's name is Jordan B. Peterson. Some people know him. Some people like him. Some people don't like him. If you don't like him, please still listen to this idea, because this is a very based in years, decades of psychological theory and research. But he came up with a plan for 3 things. So another way of, I called it guilt-based PTSD, and I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But the military uses a term called moral injury. So this could be a moral injury for somebody who did something, like you said, when they're a teenager, or maybe a really bad argument with a spouse or something like that, to where something came out. And it's basically 3 steps. The first step, and there's a whole section of this in my book on PTSD, but it's basically 3 simple steps. And the first one is to come to a realization, come to a knowledge of your own ability to do something wrong. And this psychologist actually used the word evil, because he kind of put some of this in religious terms, because it's almost like a religious type situation to resolve it. So he said the first thing is to realize your innate ability as a human to do something that is bad, evil, malevolent, and then come to the understanding that as you did that, pretty much everyone on the planet has done something bad. I can't think of a person who hasn't. I am positive that Mother Teresa, in all of her efforts, did some bad things. You know, I've heard some rumors of some stuff. I don't care about that. When we do something bad, a lot of the times we start thinking to ourselves, I'm this bad guy. I'm this bad girl. I'm on the naughty list. I've done this thing and I'm so bad. Well, here's the thing. Like, if you are actually thinking those thoughts and wondering if you're a bad person, you're not the bad person. The bad person is that 2% of the human population. It's about 2%. I think it's 1.8, who do not have emotions or feelings for things that they've done that are bad. So if you were a bad person, you would not be thinking or wondering if you're a bad person. So just know that. Know that you're a good person. Because of the fact that you are worried about it, shows that you're a good person. It was a moment of time. It's not a definition of who you are. There's a book called Ordinary Men by Christopher something. I can't remember his last name. And this book talks about German policemen, not soldiers, policemen, who in 1938-39 were taken from the Bavarian area of Germany, which is like fantastic. If you haven't been, you got to go. Yeah. And they're really upstanding, good men who kept the law, who were very certain in rules, who were taken out to, I believe, parts of the Czech Republic and especially Poland after the invasion of Poland in 39, September of 39, to small villages to round up Jews, take them out to a ditch in the back of the head, and then bury them. And they found that with these guys, when it first started, they had to give huge amounts of alcohol for these guys to just try and get through it. They found that after a few months, some of these guys were volunteering and finding joy in it. So there's the ability for the human to change, to become evil. Notice that if you're thinking about it and you're worried about that bad thing you did, that you can stop it and decide to not do it again, which is actually the second step. So go and do no more. So you after you've realized you did this bad thing, you realize that it's not a nature of you. It's not something you're redoing. You're not a serial killer. And so you're not that person. You've come to that first realization. The second step is decide to not do it. And you've probably already kind of come to that idea. You've decided, I'm not going to do it. I know where my line is drawn. I made the step here when I made that mistake. I'm going to stop way back here on the path, so I don't get close to those 5 steps before that path to where I might make that mistake again. So you think backwards. You're like, okay, I'm instead of setting my limit here that made me feel bad, I'm setting my limit way back here to where I don't do anything at all. Part 3 is where you make restitution, where you try to, in religious terms, atone for your errors. You try and make it better. And what that is you find a purpose in life that will undo the negative that you did. So if I've done something negative, I do one thing that's good, I've done nothing. But if I have a negative 1 on this side and I have 10 positives on this other side, that's 9 good things. So that's what this part of trying to atone for is, to search after a way to make life better for other people, to improve the lives of maybe not just yourself, but for other people. And when we start working for other people, in the service of these other people, trying to help other people out in some way, it pulls us out of our own muck.
I really love that concept. I actually ran into a gentleman at the gym, was just like, dude, are you Santa Claus type of thing? And I'm like, as a matter of fact, yes. And he got really emotional about it. And he was lamenting. He's in a divorce situation. His kids won't see him because of past things. Fully aware of his shortcomings, things that he could have done better, but he changed and he's trying to make recompense, but
Okay.
his children won't see him. In his mind, he was going through this, how do I complete this recompense when they won't allow me in? And the concept that you shared of this scorecard, the simple math, just go out and do good things. It will make up for the things that may seemingly seem impossible to reconcile, but they are reconcilable, even if not directly reconcilable. Man, this has been such a great conversation, Mike. I really love the practical tools that you put out. You are one of the coolest people on the top of the nice list, for sure, and your continued work and everything. And speaking of your continued work, your stated mission, which
Yeah.
was in your bio, to save over 10,000 lives. Do you have some examples of, I know that you can't talk specifics, especially when it deals with health or suicide or anything like that, but some general examples of how your work has saved lives?
I'll give two things. Unfortunately, I had a friend who bought my first book, a former coworker from years ago. She saw that I had a new book. She posted it out. We're friends on like Facebook, Instagram, so she has access to me. She knows who I am. A few months later, she sent me this message. She's like, Mike, I don't know what to do. I am so sad. My sister took her own life. She's like, I realize that that's her choice, but the bad thing is this. I was reading your book and I just barely had gotten into it. And then I stopped. And then after she passed away, I picked it back up and started reading from where I had left off. And 2 pages later, you had signs and symptoms, biggest tendencies of people who are thinking of doing that. And I wish that I would have read those other 2 pages because I would have noticed and I could have made a change. And so from that and from speaking engagements that I've been at, I've had people who have told me they read that, they got some information from, that's chapter 2 of my first book. They got an idea that they needed to talk to a family member and they believe that it saved that family member's life. So that's one way. I actually have 2 other examples. The other thing is this is kind of still generalized, but the other thing is just giving hope to people in rough times. So I was working ICUs during COVID. In this one area where I was at, there was a lot of Hispanic men who were younger, 30s, maybe early 40s, who had all come in because they were still out working, doing construction jobs. So they're in close connection with one another. And so they're acquiring it also with the darker melanation of skin, like the darker skin. People with darker skin aren't able to synthesize vitamin D as well. And so vitamin D stops virus replication. Okay. And so I saw a higher amount of those people doing that, coming down with it in this area. And I remember these guys were terrified because they had a wife and young kids. And I remember I'd go in there and I'd just tell them, I'd just say, hey, we're here. My patients don't die, which before COVID was a complete thing. I'd only had 2 of my patients before COVID who had ever passed away. I said, my patients don't die. I'm going to make you better. We're going to fix you. And I'd say some swear words. I'd say, F COVID. And they're like, huh? And they like looked confused because this nurse is suddenly saying it. I was like, F COVID. And they're like, I said, say it. They're like, F COVID. I was like, no, say it, command it. And so there's something with the emphasis. And so that I would see them just go, yeah, I've got this. And so it was that reframing of their brain from, oh no, I'm worried. Who's going to take care of my wife and kids after I pass, to screw it, this is just a moment in time and I'm going to survive. So that's one way that I feel like I definitely helped people out as well. I've had a lot of people tell me from reading the books that it saved their life or has saved a family member's life. The last thing is a patient at the military unit. We'll just call him John. John was a highly decorated Green Beret Special Forces member who did extensive work in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had moral injury or the guilt-based PTSD. This guy had told me some of the stuff that he had to do in the line of his work that was not good. And there's multiple others, a good 15, 20 at least, who have told me things very similar or just as extreme. He would come up, I was working night shift at that time, and him and all the other guys, I would sit at the nurse's station and just wait for him to come up. And then I'd talk to him, to where eventually I'd start seeing one guy would come up and the other guys would start coming around. Like 5, 6, 7, half of the guys, 10 of the guys would come up and just stand around because they knew that I was going to say something. And I just talked to them. What's interesting is this idea about the 3-pronged thing to overcome the moral injury. I got that information 2 weeks before this guy became a patient. So I was able to share those things with him. I sat with him while he was giving his trauma account. This guy, it was so hard for him emotionally that his body was physically, as he's trying to read these negative things that he'd done, going into contractures. And they had me in the room in case he had a medical emergency. And he asked me to go in that room. That's one of the few times I went in that room with the guys, because it's usually just the guys and the therapist. I helped him get through it. And he's told me multiple times. Every few months we send a message back and forth. And he's like, you saved my life, man. The hope, and it can only be a hope, is that maybe it's not that I make this world a better place, but that I make this world a little less horrible. Yeah, that's just my hope. So that's my goal for trying to get to 10,000.
You mentioned that you have written books,
Yeah.
and I understand that you've got for our listeners today, you've got a promotion for anybody who listens to get a little taste of those books. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm still working on some different methods to make this as easy as possible to people, because I'm very creative, but I'm working on the business side of things. So depending on when this is out, if they go to my website, mikevanderplas.com, and just go to the contact area and send an email to info@mikevanderplas.com, then I will send over a digital file for them of chapter 2 of my first book. And that's the part that one girl said that she wished she would have read. It's the most life-saving part out of those books. I think, I know there's a lot of other good stuff, but it's the nuts and bolts of, hey, watch out for this. People can also find me on Facebook, Instagram. Look up Mike Vanderplas. There's not a lot of us. You'll find me.
Thank you for making a positive difference in this world, Mike. And I'm so glad that our paths crossed at that passport office in Los Angeles. Tell me, as we wrap up here, is there a nugget of wisdom or a saying that you live by that you'd like to share with the audience?
One of those big things is listen to people. Just try to shut up and just sit there and be willing to hear what they have to say, with you trying to understand them. You can ask them questions and stuff, but with a focus of trying to understand them, instead of with a focus to just say what you want to say. Calm your mind and just listen to people, because when you do, it is ridiculous what they will tell you. It is amazing. People, if you truly show that you're willing to talk to them, you're willing to listen to them, they will give you so much information.
You're a great man, Mike. Thank you so much. And with every podcast, I like to throw out a challenge.
Okay.
And the challenge for this podcast is take Mike up on that promotional offer. reach out to him. It's Mike Vanderplas, Vanderplas. And so take him up on that, and then look for consciously. This is not just a general thing. This is the challenge. Look for an opportunity to cross paths with anybody and listen, and let them know through whatever method, whether you blatantly tell them, hey, I'm here to listen, or just to give that body language and intentional positivity to let them know that you are indeed interested in their lives. And then you'll be inspired where to go from there. Does that sound like a good challenge?
Sounds like a fantastic challenge. And I just have to say thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, you lift me up, brother. So thank you. And you are an angel in my life as well. So keep up the good work, and thanks for making a positive difference in helping others stay on that nice list. We'll catch you later.